JJ, how you doing, sir?
Good. Hold on.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. So I bought a new mic for traveling, and I just needed to make sure that sounded. Does it sound okay?
Yeah, yours sounds great. I think yours is better than mine. Mine, I'm out of the studio today, so I'm like, man, yours sounds great. Mine's like, yeah, it's okay, but you know what? It
So
gets the job done.
I walk into Best Buy, and I said I need something. That's not going to be crazy. And this was like $99. It's a cute little thing. Looks like a
Yeah,
space. Looks like
I
a
like that.
spaceship. It looks like a spaceship, doesn't it?
That's like a Blue Yeti, maybe. Those are good, or a Yeti. Those are good. Those are
Yeah,
good
that's
for
another model.
cardioid.
How are
Yeah.
you?
So I mean, hopping right into it here. Someone that's you've been interviewed. We've had you on our show before. And now you've kind of turned the table. You've done a million interviews in your day, and now you're the one doing the interviews on your show, The French Connection. How did this all come about? I don't know. I know Mark Mendoza does a show. How did this kind of come about for you? And I've really enjoyed the conversations you've done so far with some really great musicians, man.
That's a great question. Over time, if you ask people who have relatively good communication skills and are raconteurs, they will tell you, and they are somewhat celebrities. They'll say, "Oh, if I have another friend who tells me you should write a book, or if I had another friend who told me you should do this, or another do it," So if people told me I should be doing stand-up comedy, I should write a book, and now podcasting is everywhere. So why don't you have a podcast? And I go, well, because you just don't snap your fingers and have a podcast. You have to really think about the work involved. You have to have a plan. You have to have a team, a production team. All of a sudden you add all of that into the mix of what you normally do, and it becomes, it could become a bit overwhelming. So a mutual friend of mine, a mutual friend of me and my wife, is an executive for Live by Live. Live by Live bought Podcast One. And, when they bought Podcast One, she said, "You know what? We bought Podcast One. Maybe now you should do a podcast." And I said, that sounds great. How do you even go about it? So I had to learn, and we we did a deal, and they gave me a production team. And frankly, like everything in this world, at the beginning of it all, it's overwhelmingly confusing.
Yeah.
And then once you get into the groove of it all, it becomes pretty natural. Okay. So the thing was getting guests. Who's getting the guests? How are the guests coming on? Are they interesting? How often do you have to do a podcast? How many people are podcasting? How many episodes are out there in the world? And there's 8 million. Apparently, there's almost 9 million podcasts in the world,
Yeah.
and 80 million 30 million podcast episodes. And you are diving into a pool. And here's the best way I can put it. If some kid comes to me and goes, "Hey man, give me some advice. I want to put a band together." And I think, my God, you're about to dive into a pool with a billion bands, a billion artists, a huge history, and you're starting at the absolute bottom of the rung. Do you get intimidated by it? And the fact is, if you're 20, you don't, like I didn't at 20 when I started Twisted. You just kind of like you have youth on your side, time on your side, optimism on your side, and you don't know failure. And you go dive. And here I am, almost 50 years after Twisted, having created a world-class brand, which I can be proud of. Now I'm in a new world of podcasting, and you just have to be focused. Get great guests, ask good questions, and hope you get an audience, because at the end of the day, that's what it's about, getting an audience.
It sure is. And it's funny because you were one of our first really big guests from back in 2016. We actually had you on right before the last few dates of the 40 and Fuck It tour, as it were. We were able to be on hand to see you, Twisted Sister, at their last US show there in South Dakota. It's unbelievable that it's been 5 years since that's happened. What have the last kind of 5 years been like? Kind of leaving that legacy behind, Twisted Sister with two awesome shows, I think, in South Dakota and then one in Mexico City. And that was it. You guys quit when you were still one of the best live bands around. I'll stand by that to this day. Kind of looking back on it, what's the last 5 years been like since that last show?
Well, I've reflected a bit, and I still feel it was the best thing to do. Um, when we retired in 1988, 87, I felt there was a lot more to do, but I never thought it would get done. And then we got back together in 2003 and had an amazing 14-year run, exceeding anything I could have ever imagined, playing some of the biggest shows we ever played, releasing a Christmas record that was a hit inexplicably, which was fun, getting on national television way more than we did in the original, early days. We had MTV, but we weren't doing the Tonight Show and the Craig Ferguson Show and Regis and Kelly and all that, all that stuff that comes along with it. All of a sudden, the Christmas album, everybody wants us, even though we were told nobody wants a Christmas album until we did one. And now everybody is doing a Christmas song. Every band in the world is releasing at least one Christmas song every year, which is kind of funny. So I've been happy. I mean, I've been working on my book with my co-author, Steve Farber. The book is called Twisted Business. That'll be out in September. And I guess we'll be doing this again when the book comes out, and we'll talk about the book.
Absolutely.
The book is really kind of like finally a statement about how I run my life, and it's out there. So the book will be out. I did, up until COVID, was doing keynote speaking and motivational speaking for corporations, which was a whole job in and of itself and a different position. Not that I was intimidated by the thought of it, but I didn't know how it was going to evolve in a business, and it evolved in a way that I never expected. I thought I'd be talking to musicians, and it turns out I'm not talking to musicians. I'm talking to straight business people.
Wow.
And I'm hired by insurance companies, finance companies. I mean, I replaced, get this, in one of my talks, I replaced Timothy Geithner, the former Secretary of the Treasury, who had to pull out at the last minute, and they needed a guest speaker. And someone suggested me. And the guy who had to hire me was terrified. He goes, "Why would I want this guy in Twisted Sister to replace Timothy Geithner?" And my friend said, "Well, because he's really good. And trust me, he knows what to do, because I'm a performer and I know what to deliver." But the fact is that the twisted method is what I talk about in my book, which is TWISTED. I made it easy to consume and to digest. TWISTED, twisted. It's tenacity, wisdom, inspiration, stability, trust, excellence, and discipline. And these were the 7 lessons that we learned to become successful. So the myth is that bands like ours make some pact with the devil, and it's sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and we become famous. That's the myth. That's the belief, which, by the way, we all sell it. Let's be honest. We sell this dream. That's part of what we do. That's part of what the mechanism of stardom of rock and roll is about. Think about this phrase. People say rock is dead, but everyone goes party like a rock star. They don't go party like a World Series champion. They don't go party like a football champion. They don't party like a soccer champion, party like a plumber. Party like a bus driver. No, it's party like a rock star. So the concept of rock stardom is ubiquitous. And we exemplified an era where rock stardom was blown up and expanded. And so that's what we represent to people. So hopefully this book sets the record straight.
Well, I always thought it was very interesting the last, 14 years of Twisted's existence, from 2003 to 2016. And maybe this is just your own business acumen. Maybe this was the band making this a collective decision, but you guys made yourselves a commodity. You didn't do large scale tours. You weren't out there, kind of overexposing yourselves. You did the fly-in dates. You came in for big shows, and you were a commodity. People wanted to see that, and it kind of created an aura about the band. Was that you and sort of your business sense, or was that collectively this is what the band wanted to do? Because I know someone like Mark, who had kind of things going on full time, was hard for him to commit to a big tour. But how did that all kind of come to be?
Well, let's just say the results, the final results, which were the perception that the band just plays in front of 100,000 people all the time, was a byproduct of the limitations that we had in order to be able to proceed as a band, and actually turned out to be the smartest decision we could make, because the band didn't feel like slogging, in a tour bus and driving around and carrying a crew. We just didn't want to do it. When you're 20, 30, you can do it. When you're 60, it becomes less attractive, unless you're the Rolling Stones. I mean, frankly, the Rolling Stones, McCartney, Fleetwood Mac, they travel in their private jets, and they use a home base in a city, and they'll just fly out because they have so much money that they can treat a single show as like a local gig almost. But otherwise, you're in a bus, in a van, and you're not a, but you're in a bus, couple buses with trucks, and you're traveling, and you're always together. And I don't think we wanted to do that anymore. The band said, as long as we can maintain our health and the impact of the live show, which was important, as you pointed out, we were as good on the last night as we were on our first night. Never changed. Consistency is the key. We kept delivering. Now, D kept saying, I want to leave, I want to leave, I want to retire, I want to retire. And he's still out there doing what he's doing, but he's not
Right.
doing it. He's not doing it at this level. And he somehow can reconcile it. That's his business. I've been asked to do a lot of projects. I was asked to join bands. I said, man, I don't want to just do the bus thing anymore. This is just not what I want to do. The beauty of Twisted was we fly into a city. We were headlining. The gear's all there, the crew's there, everything is set up. You walk out on stage and you play in front of 100,000 people. And then you get in a van, you go to the airport and you go home. And that doesn't suck. And you get paid a lot of money for it, right? So we worked hard to get to that level of expertise where people say to me, how do you walk away from playing to 100,000 people? That's a valid question, because most musicians would die. Anybody would die. I mean, think about it. Most people want to be rock stars. They can't imagine it. So I, as the founding member of the band, have played over 9,000 performances in my life. And
Wow.
frankly, after like 9,000 plus performances, no matter how big or small the crowd is, it is a product of training and a job, and you just go do it. And you're with pros who know how to deliver it. Your crew, everyone's a pro. So people say to me, do you get nervous for a gig? I could be asleep 5 minutes before the show. You could, and then someone says to me, the intro tape is going to run in 5 minutes, and you go and do the show, because the consistency level was very high. And the joke, my internal joke is we're the heavy metal version of Cats on Broadway, except we're Jewish, so it's K-A-T-Z. That's the joke, right? But
I like that.
But because you do the same, you're playing the same basic 17 songs. You're playing it in different parts of the world. You're not repeating it to the same person. So you don't have to feel bad about that. And you're a pro, which means you deliver every song the way it's supposed to be delivered. When you go to a Broadway show, they're doing the same damn show every night.
Mhm.
You would like to think that they're doing the same show, bringing the same honesty to the show. And I believe we always brought the honesty to the show. I don't think that we ever phoned it in. I think you go out there. And by the way, it doesn't suck when you have 100,000 people singing, "We're not going to take it." And I want to rock,
Yeah.
It's great. But when we walked away, I had done enough. I really had done enough. That last year, I was counting down the dates. My wife said, how are you going to feel? How are you going to feel as it gets down, and then we get down to the last show in Mexico, and then there's the songs, and we start counting them down. And we got to the last song, we played SMF, and we came out and we bowed, took the bow. And I thought, wow, man, what a career, what a great run. Kind of like Drew Brees, that kind of a thing.
Good comparison.
It's kind of time to retire. It's time for me. This is my decision. I will tell you this, though. I did a motivational speaking engagement. I did a keynote speaking engagement at a thing called Extreme Leadership Conference. It's one of the conferences I get called to do. And I headlined one night. And this girl who was a very famous Broadway actress, I don't remember her name, headlined the other night. And she had been on Phantom of the Opera on Broadway for 10 years. She was the longest running star of Phantom. And she's doing her whole history. When she was 8, she saw Annie on Broadway, and her eyeballs grew big, and she had to do it. And then she struggled and struggled and struggled, and was rejected and rejected and rejected. And over time, she thought, like most performers, how am I going to handle it? And, finally, she said she got to a point in her life where she was given openings to do Phantom, and then it was like small parts on the road, and then she wound up doing it on the road, and she wound up starring on the road. And then for some reason, the person in New York was leaving, and they gave her a shot, and she did the first audition and it failed. And she goes, oh my God, my career is over. Somehow they brought her back, and she passed, and she got the gig.
Wow.
She got the gig on Broadway. That would be the pinnacle, the end, the greatest thing. And she did it for 10 years, right? So now she has a book out. She's doing these talks. And she showed clips, and she's phenomenal. And at the end of her talk, I walk up to her because we have similar, stories in terms of
Sure.
how long it takes to succeed. And I said to her the same thing that people say to me, which is, so when are you going back on Broadway? And she went, if I ever have to sing another damn song on stage, I'll kill, like, basically, I'll kill myself. Like, what do you mean? She goes, I did it for, I'm done. I don't ever want to do it again. And I thought, wow, finally somebody who could fully understand how I feel. So while, like I said, it's hard for people to fathom why you wouldn't just want to go off and play to 100,000 people, and it's beautiful to do it, you get satisfied with it. And I enjoy keynote speaking. I enjoy motivational speaking. I enjoy talking to people and taking them through my journey because it applies to every business. So
Yeah,
there's your short
no,
answer, by the way.
No, I love that, and it definitely got me kind of reflecting on the band and the times I've seen you guys over the years and the different venues and everything. And and I think that one thing that's really important is your guest last week on the Fringe Connection was Eddie Trunk, a guy who's a good friend of ours, and it was a tremendous conversation. But you guys talked about the kind of the story behind the New York Steel, which is sort of the impetus for Twisted Sister kind of, regaining its steam and continuing on after that. But talk about what it was like catching up with Eddie and how important kind of Eddie is. And then for the people that haven't heard the interview yet, kind of maybe the cliff notes of the story about how New York Steel came to be, and how Eddie Trunk had to call Ace Frehley and tell him that, sorry, you're not the headliner anymore. We have Twisted Sister.
Yeah, Eddie's a great friend and always a supporter. But the fact is that Twisted, had not performed basically for 12 years. And 9/11 was a catalyst for many things. If you're a New Yorker, especially, and you lived through 9/11, it will never leave you. It's one of these events that are, it's a horrible event for the world. As a New Yorker, with the images that I have and will have in my brain all my life, because the buildings were just, not far from me. And because everyone knows someone who died or knew someone who knew someone who died, and so it's the connection. I mean, Eddie Ojeda had a sister-in-law in one tower and a nephew in the other tower. They both got out. But my daughter's third grade teacher's husband died in it. And these are the things. So anyway, 9/11 occurs and the band is not together. And the band was just, VH1 had just shown Behind the Music, which was edited to make us look like we truly, truly, really hated each other, which in fact we did. And because the band didn't do drugs and drinking, we couldn't do the normal story that is on every VH1 where band gets together, band struggles, band makes it, band gets high, band gets ripped off by their management, band goes into rehab, 3 guys die, they come back. This is the same story that goes over and over. Well, they couldn't do it with us because we didn't drink and do drugs. So therefore, there's a whole big chunk of drama that they can't milk. But what they could milk was our dislike of each other, which they did. And it was so overblown that when it came out, I saw it, I went, oh my God, I knew we hated each other. I didn't know how much we hated each other, but now I know how much. And 2 weeks after that came out, 9/11 occurred. And Eddie Trunk calls me and he goes, I'm doing this benefit to raise money for the Widows and Orphans Fund for the New York City Police and Fire Department. And I'm told, and Eddie tells this story in my interview, he needs a headline. He needs a big name. And he says to me, he didn't tell me the drama of Ace or Anthrax. He just told me Ace is on the bill, Anthrax on the bill, Sebastian Bach's on the bill, Overkill's on the bill. But he didn't tell me the drama behind it, which he gets into in my podcast, which you can listen to on, Spotify or Apple or Podcast One at the JJ French Connection, JAYFRENCH Connection. You can hear it. But he says, man, after watching that VH1 thing, I know the last thing you're ever going to do is be able to put the band together. But boy, if you could, this would be big. And to the credit of all the guys in the band, and we're all New Yorkers. We're real New Yorkers. Yeah. I mean, we're New Yorkers. I'm from Manhattan. Eddie's from the Bronx. AJ's from Staten Island. Dee and Mark are born in Queens. It don't get much more New York than that, okay? All 5 boroughs represented. And, don't get much more New York. I know it sounds like The Sopranos almost. So anyway, I called the guys up and they went, sure, sure. Let's get together, and play a show. And And again, people do not understand that it's not as easy as snapping your fingers and doing a show. Besides the fact that you have to learn the songs all over again, you also have to learn how to play in front of gigantic amplifiers. I mean, it's like going to war. It's like you don't go into a pro football game without the uniform, and you don't go on stage with big amplifiers and a big PA system unless you're trained to deal with it, because it's crazy and it's percussive and it's like being in a war in a way. So we did 3 weeks of intense rehearsals, and we did it. And we did it with just t-shirts and jeans, that was it. And the reaction was absolutely mind-blowing, but not mind-blowing enough for us to consider reunion. Okay. We all walked away. And in fact, I was so against anything other than the focus of what this was for, which was to raise money for the Widows and Orphans Fund, that when they asked me to do press, do you have any projects coming up? I said, I'm not here to do anything more than to express our sorrow over those who died and to raise money for the New York City Police Fire Department and emergency services. That's it. I said, that's it. That's an honest representation of what we're here for. I'm not here to promote a record, any individual projects at all. This is it. And at the end of the show, I grabbed my daughter's arm, walked out the back door of the Hammerstein, walked over to 8th Avenue with my guitar case, got in a cab, and went home, and thought that would be the end. But word got out because so many people saw the show. Yeah. And we started getting offers, and we started getting crazy offers. And we, as smart as we are, had no idea that the world cared about Twisted Sister at this point. None. Zero. Okay. I mean, yes, our songs were being licensed for commercials, for commercials. Oh God, why is this thing in my screen? Okay. But for commercials and TV shows and movies at a record pace. And We're Not Going to Take and I Want to Rock are the two most licensed songs. And that was building up. But we didn't know that there were festivals in Europe. I didn't know what Sweden Rock was. I didn't know what Bang Your Head was. I didn't know what Wacken was. I didn't know what Grass Pop was. And all of a sudden, they're saying, not only do we want you, you can headline over everybody or be co-headlining, with Iron Maiden, with Kiss, ZZ Top, White Snake, or headlining over Yes and Jethro. Like, right? You're kidding me. Like, you're kidding me. We didn't know how to react to it. It took, It took 2 years for us to figure it out, and so we didn't jump on it because I didn't kind of believe it. I had no idea, and then finally we decided, let's dip our toe in that world, which in America people have no idea what it's like. In Europe and South America, none. And we wound up, being accepted, not only accepted, but it got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So we first thought it would last a year or 2 years, 2003, 2004. I said to D, he goes, yeah, we'll do it to 2006 and the whole phenomenon will be over. And 2006, then we said, oh, it's got to be over. I said, I don't want to do this anymore. So we took a break in 2007, thinking it's definitely over. The fact that we took the break, they made bigger offers. 2008 and 2000. So I'm thinking by 2010, it's got to be over, right? This 80s phenomenon's got to be over. The offers got bigger. 2011, 2012, the shows are gigantic. We go to South America. We play soccer stadiums. Never been to South America in my life. The kids in South America, they're no older than 25. We're not talking about like American fans who, are like 60 and they're bringing their kids. We're talking about 25-year-old kids who weren't even born when these records came out. But their love of 80s metal, and be really clear about this, Ozzy, Sabbath, AC/DC, Judas Priest, Kiss, Motley, Whitesnake, Def Leppard, they worship us. Yes. In a cult manner that is nearly impossible to describe. And in South America, it is a quasi-religious experience. I will tell you, it is the fervor. You know that Twisted Sister's biggest country is Mexico in terms of our Spotify numbers?
I didn't know that. Makes sense though. It makes sense.
So this was all, as smart as I'm purported to be. I didn't know this, I didn't know that. Did I take advantage of it once I knew it? Yeah, hell yeah. But, sometimes you have to learn these things.
Well, I think we maybe got just a taste of it here and there. I was at the first Rocklahoma. There was a few things in America that maybe gave you a little bit of a fervor of what you get overseas, but you guys did so much. You conquered and you did it. And 40 years later, and before we let you go, JJ, we got to talk about you just had Eddie Ojeda, your bandmate for 40 years, great guitar tandem that you guys have been, and you just had him on your podcast this week, really going back, and it's a great interview with you two, and just kind of going back and reminiscing and talking about life and the band. And you also got together with the whole band virtually on 22 Now on Mark Mendoza's show to pay tribute to AJ Pero. So kind of what's it been like just these last couple of weeks, catching up with AJ, catching up with the whole band and reminiscing about AJ Pero, who was a tremendous guy and an awesome drummer. And I know, a member of the family and brotherhood for 40 years, man.
Yeah. The thing about AJ is that if AJ hadn't have died, maybe the idea of walking away from it wouldn't have been so big in my head. And and Mike Portnoy is certainly one of the world's greatest drummers, if not only one of the world's greatest drummers, one of the greatest people. You couldn't have a nicer guy, a more respectful guy, a more talented guy, a more deferential guy than Mike Portnoy. It just doesn't exist on this planet. He's everything you would love. AJ had his thing, his ingredient, like what John Bonham was to Zepp or Keith Moon was to The Who or whatever. So that's what it was for me. And with AJ gone, I loved him so much and I miss him so much. It killed me in a way, and I went, without looking at, I would say, hello, Mr. Pirro. And he'd go, hello, Mr. French. Like we had this kind of attitude because I was the oldest and he was the youngest, and it was always like that. And I always reflect on our last conversation, which was the night before he died. And,
wow.
And that was it, who knew he was going to die in 12 hours? He died 12 hours after my last conversation with him, and we had made arrangements to meet in New York on a Monday, and he called me on a Friday and told me that he was going to leave Adrenaline Mob, but that he's going to tell them he's having therapy on his arm, and that don't get alarmed because he needs to give him an excuse. But what was happening was he was actually suffering his heart attack while he was talking to me, because he had pains going down his left arm. So he thought it was a muscle problem. It turned, I'm assuming it was part of the heart attack. Okay, while we were talking. So I said to him, will you be in the city on Monday? He goes, yeah. And I said, I'll see you Monday. He goes, and I said, listen, call your son or let your son know that we're going to use different techs in Europe and not bring your son. So he contacted his son, which he never wouldn't have happened had I not mentioned it to him. So they had a final conversation. Okay. And then the next morning I was at breakfast with the guy who released our documentary film, We Are Twisted F and Sister. And I'm having breakfast with the distributor, and I got the phone call. So we muddled through that year, 2015 and 2016. We called it a day. If it, I'm not telling you it'll never happen again, because I said that once before and it happened again. Right. So I'm not saying, but we all get along great. We talk all the time. So
that's great that you had that. And I think a lot of people enjoyed that. JJ, it's always an honor, my friend. When the book comes out, we'll have to reconnect this fall. Absolutely love the podcast. I think it's so different to have a podcast from someone that's there in the trenches that can really get into it. Because, I've done this. We've had 200 guests on our show, but I'm not a musician. Do I look like a musician? I would say that I have less hair than you, but I think I have a little more now. That's rare. Okay. Right, that's rare. Right, that's not been the case. I'm not in the trenches.
By the way, I'm not in the witness protection program.
I know, exactly.
And I'm not on chemotherapy. And it's funny because people who see you, they go, "Why'd you do this?" And some of them think you have chemo, and then they don't know how to ask you. So they're like, "How are you? Are you okay?"
Sometimes you just gotta get it.
Just did it.
I love it. I'm right there. You can see it. So my point is, you're in there and you get to talk to these people, and it's a different perspective. There's a million podcasts out there. Yours is special because you're one of the few that's in there, and that you know these people in different walks of life, and it's great. And
yeah,
congratulations.
Please listen. I've got great guests on my podcast.
Yes,
I've had Nuno Betancourt, I've had Steve
Yeah.
Vai, I've had Joel Hoekstra from Whitesnake, and I've had the guys from Def Leppard and the guys from Lynyrd Skynyrd, and authors that you probably don't know. The director, Frank Marshall, who directed the Bee Gees documentary, a lot of really interesting people. Don McLean has been on the show discussing the history of American Pie. It's stuff that I loved, and I hope that you find it interesting. And I'd like to thank you so much for supporting it. I really appreciate it.
Always. You even had our good friend Chris Jericho.
Yes,
Man,
and
he's
Chris
the
Jericho,
best.
he did Rob Halford. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Rob's interview was great. Chris Jericho, guy's like a magician, he's great. He's great.
JJ, stay safe, stay healthy, my friend. We'll catch up soon. Best of luck, and we'll catch up soon, my friend. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for having me, man.
Always.